One of the major benefits of Agile is the ability for organizations to experience faster time to market. Sadly, this is not the reality for many organizations. Organizations today are simply doing Agile rather than being Agile. So it has become difficult for them to realize the benefits of Agile and the reason for them going through an Agile transformation in the first place. Now, this is not the fault of these organizations. Organizations have hired Scrum Masters and Agile coaches to help them become more effective so that they can realize the benefits of being Agile. Now, whose fault is this? It is the fault of we Agile practitioners. Our job is to work and help these organizations to realize their objectives by being Agile. Now, the good news is we're not here to blame anybody because this problem can actually be fixed. And one of the ways to fix this problem is for you as an Agile practitioner to improve your team's velocity. Now, that's the purpose of today's video. In today's video, I am going to be sharing 7 tips that can help you improve your team's velocity so that your organization can start enjoying the benefits of working in an Agile way and being Agile. Now, when it comes to improving team velocity, there are several ways that we can combat this problem, but I will be sharing 7 tips. Now, the very first tip that you need as a Scrum Master to pay attention to that would help you improve your team's velocity is for you to pay attention to the user stories. Are the user stories for your team well understood? This is a very important factor. If team members do not understand a user story and they pull in that user story into the sprint, the probability of them not completing that work is high, which then affects the velocity, which then affects the time to market for these organizations. Because when we don't plan for the work really well and when we don't deliver as a when due, guess what? The organization will not be able to realize the benefit. They will not be able to release product and services for their customers. And guess what? They will lose their competitive advantage. So that is why I said it is our responsibility as Agile practitioners to ensure that when it comes to team velocity, we improve it in every way because it has a direct effect in the performance of the organization as a whole. So you have to ensure that your team understands the user stories. They understand the requirements that they are working with. Now, in order for your team to be able to understand the requirements and the user stories, these user stories have to be well written. Now, in order for you to ascertain whether a user story is well written, you need to ensure that that user story actually follows the INVEST criteria. And the INVEST criteria is an acronym that represents that the user story is independent, the user story is negotiable, the user story is valuable, the user story is estimable, the user story is small enough to fit within the sprint, and the user story is testable. Also, ensure that your user stories have acceptance criteria so that your team understands the scope through which they need to work in order for that user story to be accepted. The moment that you focus your attention on ensuring that your team members understand user story, you will see a direct improvement in the velocity of your team. Now, another step that will help you improve your team velocity is for you to identify the risk and dependencies ahead of time. Many mistakes the teams make is that when they're about to kick off the sprint, many times during sprint planning is when they start reviewing the user stories and trying to figure out what is needed to be done. I can tell you that at that point in time, you are already late. Because imagine that a sprint kicks off today, and today is the first time you're taking a look at the story. Today is the first time that you notice that you have a dependency and you have risk. How are you going to complete that task when you have not resolved your risk and the dependencies that you have in order for you to complete that task? And that's why it's very important that you have backlog refinement, because backlog refinement gives you that opportunity to break down your work. It gives you that opportunity to actually, estimate that work. It gives you the opportunity to identify your risk and your dependencies ahead of time. And that way, your team can then figure out how to resolve it before they begin planning for that task. So ensure that your team is having an effective backlog refinement session where they're looking at the future stories, they're breaking down those stories into smaller chunks, they're identifying the risk and the possible dependencies that those user stories have. That way, they know ahead of time whether they should walk and prioritize this work because they have everything that they need. And if they discover that they don't have everything they need, then they can always deprioritize that work and pull in something else that is important. So if your team is not following the steps where they're paying attention to user stories during refinement session, then that's something that you clearly want to do, because this would have an effect on your team velocity. Now, imagine that you have a task to drive from Texas to California, and you get into your car, your fuel is half tank, and you don't have gas money to replenish your car. How are you going to successfully get to California? It's the same way. You can't pull in work into the spring, knowing fully well that there are risks, there are dependencies. I've not figured out how I'm going to reduce this risk or mitigate this risk. I've not figured out how to resolve my dependency. I've not even spoken to the team that I have a dependency on, or maybe the individual that I have a dependency on. I have not resolved all of that, but yet I decide to get into my car and I decide to start driving. Then what happens when I get halfway and I run out of gas? Who is going to save me? Clearly, I am not going to make that trip. And when you bring it back to work, clearly your team members are not going to accomplish their goal because they went into that sprint deliberately knowing that they have risks that have not been mitigated and they have dependencies that have not been resolved. So please ensure that your team pays attention to the risk and dependencies, and we mitigate those and resolve those before we pull them into the sprint. Now, it's important for you to know that capacity has a direct impact on your velocity. You can't pull in work more than the amount of people that are required to do the work. So capacity is something that you always have to pay attention to. So let's imagine that your team has 7 people on that team. And let's assume that on average, each member is able to complete 8 story points per sprint. Then you can know for sure that all you have to do is multiply 7 by 8. So it would be unfair for the product owner to prioritize 100 story points for that sprint. We don't even have the capacity to be able to solve that task. We don't have enough manpower to be able to accomplish that goal. So knowing your capacity right from the start actually helps your team work better. It helps them improve their velocity because now they are paying attention to how much they can accomplish based on what they've done in the past or based on what they're able to do right now. That way they're able to plan, and if there is space for more, they can pull in more. But always coach your product owner to think through the team's capacity before prioritizing work or prioritizing the amount and the number of items that he or she wants the team to accomplish in a given sprint. And that's why the sprint backlog is owned by the team. They understand what the product owner wants, and they pull in the stories that will help them accomplish that goal. Now, if after reviewing the goal, they realize that this goal is too big for the cadence of our sprint, then you have to work with your product owner to ensure that your product owner refines that goal so that the capacity can be taken into consideration before they pull in and finalize their sprint planning for that sprint. It's very important. Now, another way to improve your team velocity is to track your progress. And that's why we have daily Scrum. The daily Scrum is an opportunity for the team members to come together, plan for their day, and track their progress towards their sprint goal. Now, I think one of the problems that many of us are facing is actually how the team are running their daily Scrum. Now, I know that the team has the flexibility to run their daily Scrum however they like, but as a Scrum Master, you can always provide them guidance. Now, this is the guidance that I will provide for my team. I always encourage my team to focus on the items that have been completed and then take a look at the items that are in progress before taking a look at the items that are yet to start. Now, also, I always encourage my team to work together and speak together. So rather than we working in silos and focusing on what I'm working on, what I have in progress, and what I'm yet to complete, I want us to work as a unified team. And so the structure for many of the teams that I've coached in the past will go like this. What have we completed so far? What do we still have in progress? What will prevent us from accomplishing the task that we're planning for today? So this approach makes them focus on the things that have been done and the things that they're currently working on and what might prevent them from accomplishing the goals that they've planned for today. Now, we have an overall sprint goal, but every time that the team meets, they plan for the day. Okay, so for today, this is what we're trying to get done. Okay, you're going to do this, you're doing this, you're doing that. All right, what is going to stop us from accomplishing this goal today? They rack their brains around it to see whether there's any issues that needs to be resolved. If there's none, then they are ready and more confident to hit the day. And they also quickly check on their confidence level. How do you feel? Do you feel confident that we're on track with this goal? Do you think we can accomplish it? Does anybody need any help with the task that they've assigned for themselves? Always ensure that your team has that we mindset, not just I mindset. What are my tasks? As long as I'm done with my task, I'm good to go. No, it's a sprint goal. It's not an individual goal. So even if you get completed with your task and the rest of the team is still hanging, then guess what? We still did not accomplish our sprint goal. So working with your team and encouraging them to have the we mindset actually helps them focus on the finish line. And so starting from the right and walking backwards to the left is a very good approach that you can coach your team to work on. And then you figure out that now that you're focused on, okay, are we done for the day? Are we done for the sprint? How are we tracking? Are we making progress? Does anybody need help? So it becomes a we factor and they drag themselves to the finish line. Okay. Now, another tip that would help you improve your team velocity is for you to coach your team to limit work in progress. Many times I will see, team boards where they're like almost 12 items in progress. And they're like 4 team members working on 12 things. Do you have 5 hands? Like, seriously, how are you working on 5 items at one time? Multitasking does not always work. So it's important for your team to focus on 1 item per time. Get that item to done before picking on the next item. Now, sometimes they might start working on an item and maybe they're temporarily blocked. They can always, stop on that item and pick up something else, but they should always be working on 1 item per time because that way they are able to focus. Let's remember the Scrum values. One of the values is focusing on the work that is being done per time. So when you focus on 1 item per time, 1, you're able to close that task much faster. You're able to give it more quality and you're able to complete and pull the weight of your team so that we are able to then accomplish our sprint goal. So limiting work in progress is a very good tip that would help you improve your team velocity. Now, another tip that will help you improve your team velocity is automation. We all know that in many teams, developers are always more than the testers or the QA on the team. And this is one of the reasons why we have rollovers on teams. So one of the ways that you can curb this is to introduce test automations to your team, where your team can automate many of the test cases rather than manually testing the work. Also, you can introduce CI/CD pipelines, which is continuous integration and continuous deployment pipelines to your team. They can go do further research on it so that they can improve the way they deploy their work, which then cuts time and allows for them to be able to complete work in a shorter period of time. Now, my last tip for the day is rewarding your team. This is one tip that has worked time and time again for me. Many times, I always coach the Scrum Masters in my program and even coach the teams directly to always reward themselves. So this is how it works. At the end of the sprint, you're going to tell every team member to nominate 1 person that they believe was exceptional throughout the sprint, 1 person that they believe contributed to them completing their sprint goal, 1 person that went out of their way to ensure that every team member got to the finish line, so that we reward that person as our star of the sprint. And this little rewards, they work because now everyone starts looking forward to becoming the star of the sprint. And this gives us the opportunity to improve ourselves as a team. It gives us the opportunity to accomplish our sprint goals. And it gives us the opportunity to celebrate the members of our team. Improving your team velocity has a direct impact in your organization's ability to stay competitive in the market. It has a direct impact in your organization's ability to deliver their features, their product, and their services much faster in the market. And so you have a role to play as a Scrum Master to help your team improve how fast they work, to improve how quickly they work, so that your organization can deliver products and services faster to the market. So you have a role to play. So the next time your team is slacking, I want you to point the finger at yourself and, more importantly, get to work so that you can improve your team's velocity and so that your organization can start realizing the benefits of being agile. Now, this is me wishing you the best as you go forward and improve your team. Thank you so much for spending another time with me today. I wish you all the best, and I cannot wait to catch you in my next episode. Bye for now.